Have you ever wondered just what it is that makes fish act differently during different seasons? Why do they love hitting dry flies in the summer, but then once fall rolls around, they can't seem to leave streamers alone? Why is the winter so tough for trout fishing? Well, it all has to do with seasons and more specifically, what impact the seasons have on bug life in a given river. You're going to want to keep listening to today's show to learn more about what really changes trout behavior year round. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Company. So, as we start the show today, I got to get something off my chest. And this really goes out to Alex and all the other Coke Zero aficionados out there. But I realized today that, first off, any soda out of the fountain is just not as good as what you're going to get out of the can, right? The can's superior, then bottle, then fountain. I think we can all agree on that. But Diet Coke in particular out of the fountain, that just doesn't do it for me. So I went fishing today and I stopped at the gas station as one will do before they go fishing and got myself a drink from the fountain of cherry Coke Zero, and that was way better than any Diet Coke I've ever had out of the fountain. So I owe you Coke Zero folks that much. I will say Coke Zero out of the fountain, yes, it is better than Diet Coke. Oh, shoot. Well, hey, this is Untangled. This is a fly fishing show, not a soda show. Although maybe we should do a soda show at some point. Anyways, this is Untangled. Welcome to it. I'm your host, Spencer Durrant, and like always, got a wonderful show lined up. I'm really excited to get to it with everybody today. And before we get too much further, though, we've got a big announcement to make because this is episode 34. This is August 2nd. This is the end of the giveaway, right? Our giveaway for the brand new starter pack is over, and we have a winner. So we need a drum roll. Our winner is, and I really apologize if I butcher your name here. I'm not the best with names, but Parker Caskey, I think is how you say your last name. Parker Caskey, you are the winner. Thanks so much for sharing the podcast, subscribing, leaving comments, sending in a question to the show. We really appreciate all of your support, and we're going to be in touch ASAP to get you that starter pack. So thank you. And I hope you have a ton of fun with that starter pack of yours. And just as a reminder, this giveaway was done to celebrate the launch of the brand new beginner fly fishing masterclass. It'd help if I got the names for things right. The beginner fly fishing masterclass. There we go. But it is live. It's on YouTube. There will be a link to it in the podcast description. Definitely go check that thing out. We're really proud of it, and the reception we've got has just been awesome. So thanks to everybody who's taken the time to watch and comment and share it with folks. It makes a bigger difference than you will know. And I appreciate it. Alex appreciates it. Berkeley appreciates it. This entire team here at VFC, we're just stoked that we had a lot of fun putting it together, but we're really excited to see that the information that we wanted to share is connecting with people and it's making a difference, because that's what VFC was put together for. We want to help people have a better time on the water. Part of that is learning. Part of that is becoming a better angler. So it's really fulfilling for us to see that we're able to help you guys, the listeners to the podcast, folks who support us. It's awesome to see that this is making a positive difference. So keep letting us know that it is. And if there's any way that we can improve and better help you, always let us know that as well. All right, enough of that stuff. It is time to jump into the show. And we're going to move right into story time this week. All right, kick back, Crack open those Diet Cokes. Get ready for story time with Spencer. Story this week for you. So, one of our YouTube commenters, very astute fellow, noted that, contrary to what I've been saying, not all the fish in Wyoming died because I've talked about going fishing lately. So, it really was a miracle, right? They survived. Some of them made it. No, that was always a joke. There were a few people who were legitimately curious, upset, worried that something actually happened to all the trout in Wyoming. That's been a joke and it will continue to be a joke, but apparently I need to explain it. So there you go. Anyways, I was out on a river where I'm at in Wyoming. I'm about an hour from two different tailwaters. So I've got some pretty decent fishing not too far from me. And I went down to one of them and it's kind of a tough fishery. It's very most of it's private land, so you're limited in where you can actually wade, and I don't have a boat anymore. It's a long story. Really not that long, but it's just sad. We're not gonna get into it. But I was I was fishing, like I said, tough river, and the water has been super high because we had a ton of snow and then super late spring. So the water was up. Like normally, this river's flowing at about 1,200 CFS during the summer, and it was at 8,000 for like a month. So it was just cranking. The water's been super high. I haven't been able to fish. I got down in there. This is the first time I fished it since the water came down, and I was expecting just flat out unbelievable fishing, right? I mean, we expect that every time we go, but that's what I was expecting this time. And I got my butt kicked. Like, not just a little bit, I got soundly and resolutely beaten up. Okay. It was not good. It was, I got beat up like the kid who brings apples to the sleepover, right? You're supposed to bring a treat and you bring apples for everybody. Yeah, you're going to get beat up in that situation. And that's how I felt after I walked away from the river. I lost one fish and then I had another come up and refuse my hopper. I watched him come up and he looked at it and I think he saw me and then he went back down, but still he came up. I mean, what fish refuses a hopper? That's like me saying no to wings. It's just not going to happen, but it did. So I was kind of left at a loss and I was trying to analyze not too much, but I was like, all right, why'd I get my butt kicked? Why didn't I catch any fish? Because I came home, I goose egged it, home with no fish. I did only have a little bit of time to fish, so I didn't have enough time to really change my rigs and do that kind of stuff. I'm not making excuses. It's fine to not catch fish, but I came home without having caught anything. And really, what happened, looking at it, was my drifts probably weren't as good as they could have been. So I know that played a role, 100%. But bad fly choice was probably the other thing because I never even picked up a rock to look in the water. I just kind of assumed that, oh, well, it's July. It was July when I was fishing. I know it's August right now, but it was July when I was on the water. I was like, oh, the hoppers will come out. And it was just frustrating to realize like I didn't do these basic things. I was standing in the wrong spots too. So, like I mentioned, the fish that refused my fly, it saw me. So there were a lot of things that I did wrong that I definitely could have done better. Now, what do we learn from this? Aside from get better drifts, put the effort in to actually pick the right fly, stand in the right spots. What else do we learn? Well, it's easy to get your butt kicked. And I think that's important to remember because Instagram and TikTok and wherever else you're on social media makes it look like nobody gets skunked. Everybody's out catching. People get skunked. I only know one guy who's never been skunked. That's what he tells me. I have no reason to doubt him though, because he always catches fish when we go fishing. And days that I've been skunked, he's fished circles around me. So there's one guy I know that I don't doubt. But I would say don't be ashamed. that you got your butt kicked. It's part of this sport. And it's important to take those moments, learn from them, and be better the next time you go and fish that river. Which the day after I got my butt kicked on this river, I went to a different river, and guess what I did? I got better drifts. I made sure I picked up some rocks and looked at what flies were in the water, and I stood in the right spots and I caught fish. So you do see when you put that effort in, it actually helps out, and you actually do end up catching fish most of the time. Again, it's find a goose egg though. You'll learn from it. It's not fun in the moment, and it really might not be fun to look back on either, but it does help, I promise. So if you're in the middle of a rough patch right now, a little bit of a dry spell, it's okay. All right. You'll learn from it. You go out there, you get better, and it will turn around eventually. All right. With that, I think we're done with story time for the week. It's time to dive right into the questions. We've got a ton of great questions on this week's show, and I'm answering more questions here. We got some really good short questions submitted, but I'm going to answer more short questions than I usually do because I got a bunch of them in a row that were all pretty related to each other. So I wanted to answer those all kind of in one, get all these answers together. And obviously, they're great questions as well. But then we'll jump into sort of our more in depth questions after that. But I wanted to start out with these short ones first. So, our first one, Daryl from Tennessee writes in and says, "Hi, I'm probably younger than most of your viewers, only being 15. But I love fly fishing, and the other day I spent almost $40 on flies, and I think I would much prefer to tie my own flies, and I was wondering what vice/tools you would suggest, as well as what patterns to use at different seasons. I've been fly fishing for only a couple of years, and I've only caught a couple of fish, mainly because of us not going fishing on a regular basis, but I really like dry flies and streamers. If you can help me out, that would be great. Thanks." Well, Daryl, first things first, you go tell your parents that Spencer from Untangled said to take your butt fishing. All right. Parents, take your kids fishing. Come on. Get them out there. They want to fish. Get them to fish. It's way better than them sitting inside and watching podcasts on YouTube. Wait, no, do watch the podcast on YouTube, but then go fishing. Oh, kidding aside, Daryl, that's awesome that you're just getting started. That is way cool, man. I think I was actually starting to tie flies when I was around your age as well, and I feel the pain on the cost of flies. I had to buy some the other day too from a fly shop. It was ridiculous. I couldn't believe how much. Anyways, we've got a fly tying mega kit that I would highly recommend. This thing is awesome. It's got a vise. It's got all of our tools, everything you need to start tying your own flies. We also sell packs of materials and hooks to tie different patterns. I'm going to leave a link to all of that in the podcast description for you. As for what flies to tie, well, that's really going to depend on where you're fishing and what you're fishing for. Your best bet is to talk to a local fly shop to get the skinny on what's hatching and tie up some stuff there. So hopefully that helps out, Daryl. Thanks again. Really appreciate you reaching out to us. Our next question, Wayne from Colorado writes in, "Seen a lot of Euro nymph patterns and have heard positive reviews, but don't Euro nymph. Would those same flies work fishing like a normal nymph, but as a replacement for the non-Euro version?" Wayne, that's a really good question. The short answer is absolutely. Yes. Euro flies, they're they're different than normal flies only in that they're tied on a jig hook and they tend to be more streamlined so that they'll sink quicker. So they have fewer like things sticking off of them. It helps the fly drop quicker, and that's important in the European style of nymphing. So as far as differences though, that's about it. A Euro pheasant tail really isn't all that different from a regular pheasant tail. In fact, the jig hooks actually hang up less on rocks and sticks and such, which makes them really helpful. And I tie almost all of my nymphs these days on jig hooks. So I tie them Euro style because they get hung up less. I like the kind of cleaner look of the Euro flies as well. I use those all the time. So 100% use those. There's no reason to not to. So really good question. Appreciate it. And the last of our short questions, Paul from Minnesota writes in and says, "Thank you for all the helpful information. These podcasts are great. But honestly, we all know that beer is better than both Coke and Pepsi. I usually purchase my flies from a fly shop, but was wondering how you would recommend getting into fly tying, and if you have any recommendations for easy flies that will work for multiple fish, trout and bass mostly. Thanks, Paul from Minnesota." Well, Paul, I'll have to take your word for it on the beverage thing. I don't drink. None of us here at VFC actually do. Uh, but as far as the fly tying stuff, dude, just jump on in. We actually have an entire fly fishing along with our fly tying mega kit. And the master class is designed to take you from an intermediate angler, or not an intermediate, from a beginner tire to an intermediate tire pretty quick. Alex really spearheaded this whole project. He spent months locked in the basement in his studio. His wife fed him through a hole in the door. He wasn't allowed to leave until he did a perfect fly tying masterclass. True story. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. I'm kidding. Just a tiny bit, though. Alex really did. He bust his butt. I've been super impressed with our fly tying videos. They're phenomenal. They're some of the best out there. And I'm not just saying that. I think they're really, really good. Uh, I'll leave a link to the fly tying masterclass in the description so that you can go ahead and get started that way as well. And there's also our fly tying mega kit, that in the description as well. Between our tying supplies and our fly tying masterclass, you're going to be set. You don't need to go anywhere else. We've got you covered. As far as flies that work for multiple fish, streamers and nymphs, man. Bass will eat a lot of the same nymphs as trout, same with streamers. So focus on those and you'll be in good shape. All right, and with that said, let's jump into some of the more in-depth questions for the rest of the show. First question comes to us. Tim wrote in. He actually sent us an email. You can submit questions that way as well. If you ever want to if you want to share where you're from as well, just make sure you do that in the email when you send it in. But Tim wrote in, "Can you discuss the effects of the different seasons on fishing and the hatch? What about the time of day during these seasons? Lastly, which is better after a long day of fishing, scotch or whiskey?" Well, Tim, again, none of us here at VFC are going to be a help with that question. None of us drink, but and I know a fisherman who doesn't drink is like a priest who doesn't go to church. It's weird, but it happens. All right. Oh, anyways, your question, you actually hit on something really important. Something that I think a lot of beginners fail to recognize, fail to realize maybe would be the word. But the seasons actually have the biggest impact on fishing because the seasons directly impact bug life. And fish, by and large, live their lives according to what the bugs are doing. So if the bugs are out and about, the fish are going to be out and about. If the bugs aren't, then the fish are kind of going to hang out. And that's why you see the trout fishing especially slows down because there are very few aquatic insects out and about actually moving around doing something. Midges are about the only thing you can count on during the winter, although some rivers will have sow bugs or scuds, but those are freshwater shrimp. They're not an aquatic insect, so it's a little bit different. At least I think so. That's my understanding. There's probably an entomologist in the comments who's going to come in and say, well, actually, it's this. I'm going off of what I know here, all right? But in the spring, we start to see the first mayflies emerge, right? Then some stoneflies can come out early, like the squallas. Those come out in the spring. Then we move into the caddis, yellow sally, salmon flies, golden stones, some of the other bugs in the summer. And a lot of those bugs will stick around until the fall. I mean, the stoneflies don't. The stonefly nymphs are around, but the actual like hatch of stoneflies or the emergence of stoneflies is the better term for it. That those are shorter windows of time, right? The salmon fly hatch you hear about in Montana and Idaho, the short window of time. The nymphs are around, but the big winged adults are only around for a little bit of time. They're not going to stick around all the way until fall. But a lot of those other bugs will stick around until the fall, and then you end up with really just caddis and mayflies coming off. Winter hits, and then it's all back to the midge game. And midges are great because they hatch year round. They kind of save our butt for us year round. They're really nice. So when when there's the most food available, which would be late spring through early fall, that's when the fish are most active, right? They're going to be less active and therefore harder to catch when there's less food around. Unless you happen to fish a tailwater, a lot of streams are going to be pretty tough to fish during the winter because there's so little food available. So the fish don't really move to eat unless you bump them in the nose with something. Also, during the winter, the fish will conserve their energy because the water temps cool down significantly. So they're not going to be moving much either. There are exceptions to these rules, of course, but this is a pretty good generalization to help you understand what the seasons, like how the seasons work and how they impact the fish. So that's why it was so important and why I mentioned that in the hook of this episode, because understanding that the seasons play a huge role is going to directly impact your ability to go out and confidently fish. Is you don't want to go out like it's a beautiful spring day and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be amazing," but you don't understand that the water's still super cold, so the bugs haven't really started moving, so the fish really aren't going to be moving a lot. Understanding how interconnected the seasons are and the fish and the bugs, once that all clicks, it really starts to make sense as to why some times are such better fishing than other times. And even in the context of just the day, it makes a lot more sense because you understand, okay, the bugs are so much more active right now in right at dusk because that's just when they're hatching, and so the fish are gonna be way more active at dusk than perhaps in the middle of the day. So, you learn these little things, and it just starts to kinda click, and it might seem kinda obvious, but the more of these associations you make and you realize the interconnectedness of things, I think it makes the whole fly fishing process a lot smoother. Now, as far as the time of day, in the winter or whenever the water is still really cold, you want to fish at the warmest part of the day. The idea is that the warmth will spur on any bug activity and the fish follow that. A good example, when I lived back in Utah, I would get up and in the winters on the weekends, I would get up and I wouldn't be on the water until about 2 in the afternoon because that's when it was the warmest and that's when the bugs were, and that's when the fish were going. There were a lot of midge hatches, so it was a lot of fun because I'd end up catching a lot of trout on midge dry flies in the middle of winter. It's just tons of fun. If you ever have the opportunity to do it, do it. Now, as far as the rest of the year goes, you're usually going to see, like I mentioned, really good hatches just a few hours before dusk, right at dawn, and then depends on the bugs themselves for what the hatches are like throughout the rest of the day. Blue winged olives, for example, they really kind of keep the banker's hour hatch anywhere from like 9 to 5. They'll hatch. So it's a little outside that typical dawn and dusk window, but you'll see that. And the more you fish, the more you're going to nail down the timing, especially on your local rivers, of when the hatches occur. So hopefully, I know that was kind of a long, meandering answer there, but hopefully, Tim, that answers the question that you had. Thanks for sending that one in. I really appreciate it. Next question comes to us. Matt from Georgia writes in, says, "Hey, Spencer, I listen to multiple fly fishing podcasts each week, but yours is my clear favorite." Oh, Matt, you shouldn't have. No, kidding aside, thank you very much. As a school superintendent, I'd guess that your students love both your class and your sense of humor. Thanks for making me laugh when I often need it. I have two questions regarding the dry dropper technique. First, what are the pros and cons of using fluorocarbon for the dropper as opposed to using nylon tippet? Second, is it effective to use the soft tackle as a dropper? I only hear the experts talk about using weighted nymphs as a dropper, wondering if soft tackle under a dry dropper is a good idea. P.S. Since all the fish in Wyoming drowned in the flood, I'm fishing in Montana this July. Matt, thank you. Appreciate that question a lot. I certainly hope that my students enjoy my class. For those who don't know, I teach high school. It's the day job, and we're coming up on starting the school year again. I can't believe how fast summer flew by, but it'll be great. Get back into it. Anyways, I hope Montana treated you well, Matt. I hope you had a really great time there. I haven't fished in Montana in like probably 3 years. I think, which is crazy because I'm only about an hour away from Montana and a lot of really good fishing in Montana. So I'm not hurting for options. I just haven't done it. Wyoming's got a lot of stuff to keep me occupied for the time. Anyways, you've got a couple of great questions here. So for those who don't know, the fluorocarbon and monofilament are the two types of materials we make leader and tippet. And actually, the second episode of this show was dedicated to explaining the differences between mono and fluoro. So, we're going to go over all that info in that episode. I'm going to leave a link to that in the podcast description. I'm not going to go over it again here in as much detail. So, if you need a refresher on that stuff, definitely go listen to that episode of the show. Real quick, though, just to make sure we're all on the same playing field, fluorocarbon is almost invisible in the water. So that's its big selling point. It's also supposedly going to be stronger when it's wet and have higher abrasion resistance than monofilament. However, fluorocarbon doesn't stretch as much as mono, so it can be a little bit more brittle. It does, as I said, though, it has a higher breaking strength and it sinks, monofilament floats. So that's the key to remember. Fluoro is invisible and it sinks, monofilament floats. So those are your really big differences. There's going to be a lot of differences in the strength of the tippet and leader based on the brand style that you buy, and that's a whole podcast in and of itself. Maybe that's the rabbit hole Alex and I need to dive down for our next podcast. But that sets the stage, so we all know what we're talking about here. As far as answering your question, Matt, there is absolutely no downside to using fluorocarbon as your dropper material. In fact, I know a lot of folks who do just that. I I used to use a lot of fluorocarbon. I don't as much anymore. I tend to run mono on just about everything these days because there's actually been some interesting information come out over the last couple of years. I don't know if it just came out over the last couple of years or if I just started seeing it. Uh, but there, when you, sorry, I'm trying to think out loud here too much and talk at the same time. When you drop a piece of monofilament line in the wilderness, which I know we try to clean up after ourselves, but dropping a piece is inevitable, especially the little tags that you're trimming off of your flies. It's going to happen. Hopefully not on purpose, but it's going to happen. That monofilament line is biodegradable, but it takes 600 years to degrade. Fluorocarbon is also biodegradable, but it takes 4,000 years to degrade. So I found this information from there's the folks over at Denicky Outdoors. I've linked that in the podcast description as well, so you can read more about this topic. And I've seen some folks say that they're moving away from fluorocarbon entirely because how long it takes to break down in the environment, and they're only using monofilament. That's an option. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm just giving out some information. I Part of the reason that I don't use fluoro anymore is yes, that it just is not as environmentally friendly. The other reason that I don't use fluoro as much anymore, I just it, it's felt a lot more brittle to me, and I feel like I've had more issues with line breaking than I do with monofilament. Now, I'm ready to be completely run over the coals for that comment in the comments. So have at it. I'm sure everybody has had different experiences. Again, I'm not telling you what to do or that you're wrong or anything like that. I'm getting my experience here as background to your answer. So 100% use fluorocarbon as a dropper. It's great because it sinks and it's invisible. So it is a really wonderful dropper material. And I do still use fluoro when I'm fishing streamers because I've noticed it makes a huge difference with streamer fishing. And I do use it occasionally with nymphing, but I'm really starting to get away from using fluoro just for a lot of different reasons. So, anyways, moving on here. Second part of your question. Soft hackles are wonderful, wonderful droppers. We talk about using weighted nymphs all the time because if you're fishing a dry dropper, for instance, you're often trying to cover two parts of the water column. So you want that nymph to drop and target fish that aren't actively feeding on the surface. But if the fish are suspended a bit higher, a soft tackle is a great fly to use because maybe they don't want your dry, but they see that soft tackle, and that's what makes them go ahead and smack your flies. It's really effective to use soft hackles during hatches because soft hackles can imitate emergers. So it's a great fly to have in your back pocket for those moments. And in general, I've found that folks really don't fish soft hackles enough. They can be really effective flies. Fishing them on their own is a different art form, and there's a lot of videos on that. You can certainly get into that if you want, but they do make wonderful droppers. So fantastic questions. Thank you for writing in, Matt. Really appreciate it. And just like that, folks, this is the last question of the show. It's flying by like usual. Let's jump right into it. Reed from Washington writes in. It says, Diet Coke, Diet Coke, Diet Coke with 3 exclamation points. Oh, shoot. I have to say that your podcast is played throughout my workday and calms the need to fly fish when I can't find the time to get out to fish. For the question, I have fished a lake recently and noticed that different fish species were feeding at different depths. Rainbows were feeding under the surface, and the cutthroat were taking dry flies off the top. Is there a certain setup that I should be using? Thanks for everything you do with the podcast and keep them coming. Reed, I appreciate that. And, Diet Coke, yeah, I can drink to that. Got myself a can of it right here. So good. So good. Oh, well, Reed, it does almost seem like you kind of answered your own question. If I'm reading it correctly, maybe I'm not, but it sounds like the situation that you're describing, if you wanted to catch just rainbows, then a dry dropper wig, a dry dropper rig would be the good rig to go to, right? If you wanted to catch just cutthroat, then a dry fly would be the play here. But in situations like this where you see different fish species feeding at different depths, my big thing would be just don't overthink your situation too much. Unless you're hunting a particular species, your goal is to tie on flies that you think are going to get. If you see fish eating off the top, then by all means tie on some dries and get to work. We're out here to enjoy ourselves and catch a few fish along the way, but don't overthink it too much. A lot of times we do that, myself included. We sit there and we turn it into some gargantuan like championship chess match when it's just checkers, right? It can be complex and it can be tough to decipher, but it doesn't always have to be. And we certainly don't need to add to that and make it harder on our own. So just don't overthink it. Go out there and have fun. That's my big pitch here, Reed, and hopefully that answers your question. If you need more clarification or anything else from me, please feel free to reach out. And that goes for everybody listening. If there's any questions that I answer on the show or stuff that you'd like clarification on, reach out to us. Right? That's what we're here for. Like I said at the beginning of the show, what we're trying to do here at VFC is create tons of resources and information. We're trying to put it all out here so that everybody can have a much easier time learning to fly fish and a much more enjoyable time doing it. We're just wanting to make this a wonderful experience for everybody involved. So if there's any way that I can help out and make that better, reach out and let us know. And with that said, we've reached the end of yet another episode of Untangled. Please do not hesitate to send in any questions if you've got them, no matter how big or how small. I will answer them on the show. I'll get to them eventually, even if they've been submitted a while ago. I'll get to them. I like to kind of stack the questions in certain ways as we go throughout a show. Really helps build the show out, put it together nicely. But don't forget to submit questions. There's always a link in the podcast description. And remember, the beginning fly fishing masterclass is out. You definitely don't want to miss that. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube so you do not miss any of those episodes. And please rate and subscribe to this show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to it on right now. And until next week, everybody, tight lines.